From Chicago's Can TV, a look at the week's events is reported in the newspapers, in the blogs and online, and on radio and TV. This is Chicago Newsroom.
And hello again. Why, you've joined us here on Can TV for yet another edition of, what is this program called? Oh yes, Chicago Newsroom, right here on Can TV. I'm Ken Davis, and I hope you survived NATO. You managed to make it through. You went away for a few days, I suppose, and came back or whatever. Everything's still here, as far as we can tell. Everything made it through, so we'll probably talk about that on a future show. But today, we are seriously going to talk about the budget. When you're running a big company, a nonprofit, or maybe in this case a big city government, you create thousands and thousands of reports, of press releases, proposals, but there's no document that's as important as the budget because it explains in really excruciating detail what your priorities are. Perhaps you want to give a little bit more money to this function or that, but if you have to do that, it means taking some money away from something that maybe is less important. Manuel had to put a budget together in a pretty big hurry when he came into office, and the one he developed for $6.3 billion included a lot of cuts. The next budget's being written right now, and it might give us an even clearer view of what the Emanuel administration's priorities are, but look about the pressures. The pressures are enormous. If new contracts with the police and the fire unions include raises, new work rules or increases in the number of police officers, all kinds of things could really make the budget very stressed. And so there are liabilities that the city is simply going to have to deal with, and those include pensions and all those sorts of things. Right now, there's about $12 billion just in pension money that the city doesn't have. And the person who's responsible for writing that budget is Alexandra Holt. I have no earthly idea why she took the job or why anybody would want it, but she not only took it, appears to be doing a good job doing it, and has found a half an hour to come over here to Can TV to talk to us about the budget today. Alex, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Glad to be here.
Thanks for being here. I saw you a couple of weeks ago at the City Club of Chicago, and I thought you did a masterful job in front of all these crusty old guys who, think they know everything about the budget, to kind of like lay things out about where the money comes from and where the money goes.
Sure.
And it really gives you this incredible, I don't know, just kind of, it gives you the shivers sometimes. And one of them is this. I mean, we have this on the screen. We'll show this, but
sure.
I mean, do we need to say anything more than that? And let's see, you come in, where do you come in? Around here, right?
Yes.
That's where you start.
At the final
right.
dot,
Yeah.
right.
So it's like, here we are, bouncing along, and then boom, and then we hire Alex Holt to come in and be budget director. So congratulations on it.
Thank you. I appreciate that much. I think the thing that's important about that slide, Ken, is that it's really about putting the city's fiscal situation in context. I mean, there's been a lot of focus on the budget gap for 2011, and particularly for the budget gap this year, right? The $635.7 million and what that means. But you do need to think about the city's budget in context. You do need to think about the fiscal situation in context. And I think what this slide shows you is that the budget deficit that we were facing for 2012, this isn't the first time we've been facing that deficit, right? There's been this pattern of deficits for the last 10 years. They've been growing over time. The recession certainly exacerbated that situation. There's no doubt about it. But the fact is
it's not all recession.
It's not all recession driven, because we've got a structural deficit, and our revenues have not been growing as fast as our expenses, and the expenses have been outstripping the revenues, and that has continued over time. The recession certainly exacerbated it, but I like to say that we would have been here at some point in time if we hadn't addressed the structural deficit, and that when you look at what happened between 2007 and 2011, that use of one-time asset reserves has really been masking the city's true fiscal situation.
We have to talk about that. I mean, really, there are kind of a couple of things. There's the one-time use of money.
Yep.
And then there's this just horrible issue of pensions, which Chicago's not alone in. Every state, municipal government, everybody just kind of like turned their back on paying the pension fees that they were supposed to do. And now we're just like slamming into this wall at 60 miles an hour. We could just take a quick look at this second slide, which I think is really interesting because in the red, we see our expenditures, which are you know, they're going up. They're not dramatically rising, but they are certainly going up. And then you look at the revenue, and that revenue is falling incredibly. I mean,
Right.
and it has been going up a little bit, but
Well, but I think the thing that's important about this chart is that you see the expenses go up, and they've gone up about, on average, 2 to 3% per year over the last 10 years. But you'll notice that starting in 2001, that while the revenues have been increasing, they have at no point been sufficient to match the expenditures, which is why we've had this ongoing budget deficit. Again,
we
yeah.
have to say, you just said 2001,
Yes.
which, if I'm not mistaken, was 11 years ago. So,
Yes, it was.
It's been a while.
Right.
Yeah.
So the chart that that we've got up that shows the revenue and expense line was something we did last summer as part of a new initiative from the Emanuel administration to really be transparent about our finances and to really talk about what our fiscal situation was. And so we put out this document called the Annual Financial Analysis that looks back 10 years. We'll do it again this summer. Talks about revenues, talks about expenses, and then also looks forward 3 years and says what's going to happen to our finances under a couple of scenarios, right? If revenues continue to rise, what happens? If revenues stay flat, what happens? And if revenues and expenses go down, what happens? And so this chart was to say that if we didn't do something about the structural deficit, if we didn't take the steps that we took in 2012, what would happen to our deficit over time? And you see in 2014, you see an almost $800 million gap. Now, I will say that we shouldn't be, when we put the financial analysis out this summer, we're not going to show that same $800 million gap because we've actually taken big steps in 2012 to address that structural deficit and to bring those.
The red line, the expenditure line
Yep.
on top, will have come down some.
Yes, it will have come
And also
down.
the revenues will have gone
Yep.
up some.
Some. It'll be mostly about expenditure control and efficiency and all the kind of changes that the administration's been putting in place to bring that red line down.
Now, of course, a huge part of the problem is that there are things over which you as budget director just simply have no control. I mean, a lot of this is legislative.
Yep.
It's the other part of government
Yeah.
that's doing things. And one of those is a decision to fund or not fund pension liabilities, which, again, you can't mandate that. And the other thing about it is, of course, is union contracts,
Right.
which, again, you don't negotiate them. You just have to sort of fund them or figure out a way to make them get paid for. But I mean, that has to be a huge issue that we're facing right now. I mean, we see in the papers today the teachers' rally yesterday.
Yep.
That was, I mean, it's so funny in a kind of a weird way to have compared it to all the hoopla about the NATO conference, and here there was a bigger march down Michigan Avenue, and we weren't worried about the police or anything at that point. We were just all of a sudden there's 5,000 teachers in red T-shirts marching down Michigan Avenue.
And a guy in a cow outfit, by the way.
I didn't see him,
Yeah.
but I take your word for it. You are the budget director.
He was outside my window.
Yeah. There are real possibilities that police and fire, well, teachers, again, we should say teachers don't come out of your budget
No,
either.
they don't. That's correct.
That's the Board of Ed, that's a separate taxing levy, but certainly the fire and the police do. And a number of other unions, all of whom, or many of whom, have negotiations coming up, and that could skew the budget even further.
Yeah, so I think there's both with the union negotiations and the pension issue, there's a real balance there of being fair to the employees, but also being fair to our taxpayers. And I think the pensions are a particularly good example of that. I mean, you talk about the failure to fund, but the reality is the pension obligations are set by state law, right? So our employees have been paying in exactly what they were supposed to pay in. They've done exactly what they're supposed to do. And, honestly, so have our taxpayers. They've been paying in exactly what they were supposed to be paying in, and they've made that contribution. The problem is that neither of those things has been sufficient at any point in time to meet the obligations that we've got going forward, right?
You could argue that the taxpayers believed, although they probably weren't thinking of this at all, but they believed that they were making their contribution to the pension funds, but then that money just simply got diverted by various legislators and city councils into other things, into other projects.
Well, I don't know. I don't know about that. I mean, the amount that the city contributes is set by state law. I mean, taxpayers have been putting in that money. It comes off of our property tax levy, right? They've been putting it in. They've been putting it year after year. That money's gone where it's supposed to go to the pensions. Employees have been putting in what they're supposed to be putting in year after year. The fact of the matter is, though, is that those amounts of money have not been sufficient to pay out the benefits that have been guaranteed to those employees. needs. And so it hasn't, and that's why we've got this enormous unfunded liability that we talk about. And that unfunded liability is, about $20 billion. I mean, it's significant.
The total budget is $6 billion.
Yeah, without the grants, right? Our total budget's $6 billion.
And you had a $20 billion pension
liability, right?
Whatever you want to call it.
Right. And so, that's part of the discussion that's going on right now with pensions. How do we make sure that our employees have a secure retirement? They've been planning for it. There are a lot of them that are close to retirement. And the reality is, with the state of some of the pension funds, they may or may not get that retirement that they've been working towards. And same thing with our taxpayers. Given under current law, our pension liability, our pension payments go up to $1.2 billion in 2015. Our taxpayers can't support that. They pay $470 million now. In 2015, they're going to have to come up with an extra $700 million. And that's not something that's sustainable.
Yeah, I agree. I agree it's not sustainable. So,
what do you do about it?
I mean, I have no follow-up question, So
come on, Ken.
So what do you do?
Well, and we've got to make changes. I mean, we've got to come to agreement on what the changes look like. And, the mayor is very consistent with what the state's been talking about, has talked about a couple of things. One is COLA. What do we do about COLA? A lot of our pensions have a guaranteed 3% compounding raise every year. So if you retired in 1995 with a $60,000 a year pension, you're now getting $100,000 a year because of that compounding.
Although, in fairness, there weren't that many people retiring in 1995 with $90,000 pensions, were there? I mean, we're basically
$60,000 pensions.
60. So, but we're really talking about the vast majority of people who are getting pensions aren't getting $60,000, $80,000, $90,000.
No, I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that. I mean, obviously our average pension is lower than that. But the fact of the matter is that when you take things like compounding cost of living adjustments, which have outstripped inflation by 30% for the last 10 years, right? That's not going to be sustainable because those pension benefits are being paid by a return from the fund, right? The fund has invested the money; they're getting a return. You're paying out more than that fund can even generate in terms of a return. And it's not the specific 60 to 100,000 that's important as it is the magnitude of growth and what happens when you talk about compounding interest and you talk about a guaranteed 3% raise per year in a time period where, frankly, a lot of people don't have jobs and certainly most people aren't getting raises. And that compounding cost of living continues to dig the hole deeper and deeper. So you can do a couple of things like what Rhode Island has done, which is put a pause on the cost of living adjustment.
Mayor Emanuel's talking about doing that for 10 years.
Yep,
right?
We've talked about that. And then going to potentially a simple interest after that. Other drivers are, of course, retirement age. We've got fairly generous retirement ages, which are not consistent with life expectancies these days. They're not consistent with what Social Security provides. Also, employee contribution. Employees contribute anywhere between 8 to 9%. City gives a multiple of that. If you work anywhere else or you're contributing to Social Security, you're going to be contributing more.
Do you get a feeling that I do? And I guess this is as good a time as any to say we've known each other a long time. We worked together back in, I guess we met like in '92 or something
like that,
in the Department of Environment. So we've had a lot of time at the city together, and we've seen a lot of these, I would say, just ridiculous situations that need to be addressed. But do you get the feeling that there's a kind of a public, among the taxpayers, a kind of a revulsion here that they want to see? They want to see draconian changes in the union contracts or in the pension deals? I mean, or is it? Is it something less than that? I mean, I don't know. I don't know how to read the public's mood on this.
Well, it's obviously going to vary individual by individual, but I think as a general matter, the public is concerned about two things, right? They're concerned about their taxes and they're concerned about their financial viability for their families. But they're also concerned that the city employees who provide services to them on a daily basis are treated fairly. And it's a matter of trying to balance those two things so people as taxpayers feel like they're being treated fairly and they can continue to support their families and they can continue to have their own retirement and their own livelihood but at the same time making sure that, that their firefighters and their police officers and their streets and sanitation workers who are in their neighborhoods every day also get treated fairly.
This is kind of the softer side of the discussion, but I think it's really relevant to it. It's very interesting to me to see that Tribune poll of a couple of weeks ago about the teachers and how there was more support than I would have imagined for the teachers and for their pay raises and the sense that, hey, if you're going to make them work an extra hour or two a day, then they should be paid more. That's something that I was a little surprised to see. And of course, now we have this new thing with McCarthy and the police, and we're in this love affair with the police department. I've lived here my entire life, and I've never seen a moment like this where it's like people are saying, "I love the police." Well, that won't last, of course, but there is something interesting to me about this relationship that we have with our public servants. We love to bitch and whine about the city, and the city's not doing anything. But you talk to most of you. If you just go down to the ward level or to the neighborhood level, you walk down the street, you say, well, "How's your garbage service? How's your street light service?" You're going to find most Chicagoans find it's pretty darn good, and they're basically, I would say, most people are very happy with those kind of services. So at some point, it's incumbent upon the administration to turn back to people and say, "Look, this is what we're giving you, high quality service, and it's going to cost more. Everything in your life costs more." I don't know how you deal with that.
Well, I think there are a couple of things, but you are right. There is a balancing act there because people do feel like they get good service. They often know the city employees who provide those services to them, particularly when you talk about Department of Streets and Sanitation and our sanitation laborers, right? There's a connection there with those communities, and those people tend to know those employees and feel like they get good service from them, and frankly, they do. I mean, you can pretty much put anything in the back of your, by your garbage truck, by your garbage can, and it gets picked up and the city takes care of it for you, which is not true in other communities.
No, it's not. No, it's not. I have a lot of friends who live in Evanston, and believe me, it's not like that there. Yeah.
But people need to understand what those things cost. And people don't know the cost of those services. I mean, we've talked a lot about garbage collection and the cost of garbage collection, and the city's cost of garbage is about $250 a ton. Even once you take out the cost of disposing of the garbage, we're probably paying $100 a ton more than LA or other big cities are. And these are cities that have many of them union employees. They're paying, union scale wages. And so it's less about the cost of the employees and much more about the efficiency and how we deliver the service.
So we're not being as efficient as we can.
No, I mean, let's take the grid garbage example, right? We pick up garbage right now on 50 separate grids. And when you look at some of the ward boundaries, I mean, you've got, wards shaped like C's or like J's, that the employees are spending.
Because they're created by legislators.
Right. That the city employees are spending more time driving from point A to point B than they are actually picking up garbage. And that drives up our cost. It drives up our cost in terms of fuel, the number of trucks we need, the number of sanitation laborers we need, the number of truck drivers we need, the number of
Pounds
supervisors
of hydrocarbons
we need.
In the
right,
air.
Exactly. And all that stuff, if you can start to get at keeping your quality of service high or improving your quality of service, but getting at those underlying inefficiencies, you can start to bridge the gap between the quality of service that Chicagoans have come to expect and the cost associated with those services.
Because I'm so jealous of the few minutes that we have here, I want to change subjects a little bit and talk about alternative ways of finding or raising and controlling the revenue that you get. There is only so much that can be squeezed out of taxpayers, but I think a lot of the critics have said that Mayor Daley before Mayor Emanuel, and now Mayor Emanuel has taken it to an almost virtuoso level of performance. There are ways of just raising nickel and diming, I think is the term that's often used. All of the little fees, like the walking down your front porch fee of $10 a day or something.
Don't give me any ideas, Ken.
Yeah, I know. I was thinking the other day. I parked over on Western Avenue by Irving Park somewhere, and there were no meters there. And I thought, my God, Alex hasn't seen this yet. They'll have to come out here and put meters in. But I kid the budget director. No, seriously, the only thing that seems to be left to governments is to say we're not raising your taxes, but we're going to put in red light cameras that are going to send you $100 tickets, or we're going to we're going to raise water fees and every other fee that we can possibly raise. We're going to just max them out, and then 2 years from now we're going to come back and max them again, and that just seems to me like, I understand why it happens, but it seems like a pretty crummy way to run a government. I mean, it's sort of like you're making this really kind of inconvenient way of life for the city.
I guess I'm going to question your premise that that's what's happened. I mean, I look back at the 2012 budget and how that was structured. You know, we had this $635 million gap in our corporate fund, right?
Certainly did.
$78 million was revenue related, right? And then all the rest of it was these efficiencies we're talking about. So, you know, this move to grid garbage, there's, $15 to $20 million in this year's budget to roll out grid garbage this year. There were a whole series of other kind of just efficiency and cleanup things that happened in that budget, and a real focus on trying to get at where we are too expensive or more expensive than we should be, or where we can partner with a private or not-for-profit entity who can provide better service than we provide, but at a lower cost. And that's, one of the things that we've talked about with respect to primary health care. But then, like I said, garbage, the grid garbage, I mean, that's a big one. There's a huge cost savings there. We're going to roll that first grid out in about 2 weeks, and we're expecting a 20% reduction in the number of crews that we actually use for that first grid. And when you're talking about a $300 million budget for sanitation collection, or for the Department of Streets and Sanitation, 20% is not an insignificant amount.
Right.
And so the fees that were in the 2012 budget were focused on a couple of things, right? They were focused on specific users of services. Let's take water as an example. We've got some of the cheapest water in the country. We pay right now, or we did last year, less than a third a penny a gallon. By the time the water rate increases are fully enacted at the end of the 4-year period, we'll be paying 2/3 of a penny per gallon. That is substantially less than most communities pay. It's a heck of a lot less than the suburban communities pay, and there's a real need there to actually invest in our system. I mean, we've got more than 1,000 miles of water pipe that's over 100 years old. We can't continue to do that. And the fact of the matter is guess what? We're already paying for that. We're paying for it in flooded basements, we're paying for it in flooded streets, in leakage, we're paying for it in all kinds of ways. We're just not paying for it directly through the water that we use, and we're not investing in the system and making sure that people's basements don't flood.
I think another criticism that's been leveled in the media, certainly, and other budget critics would say that we're relying too much on privatization. Not you specifically, but that we as a country, and certainly Chicago, has gone too far down this road of selling off our assets and having private corporations come in to run things, and then we find out 5-6 years down the road they weren't really running them any more efficiently than the city was running them in the first place. So that's another tight wire that you have to, tightrope that you have to walk, and I think there have been, there's been so much skittishness because of obviously the parking meter deal, and I know Mayor Emanuel said that the other day at the City Council. This is, when he was talking about the infrastructure trust, this is not the parking meter deal. Not. But I'd like to hear your version of why it isn't. I mean, why is the infrastructure trust not the same thing? It's not. I agree. It's not the parking meter deal, but I guess the question that I'm ultimately getting down to is, what went wrong with, or why can we no longer just do what we always did, which is go to the bonding houses and borrow money to rebuild our infrastructure? Why do we have to go to private capital, because we're going to have to pay them back too, but we don't quite know how we're going to pay them back, and it's not going to be through taxes, we've been told. No. So this all begins to become, let's just say, murky.
So you've got a whole bunch of questions in there.
I sure did.
So let's maybe start with the first one.
Peel that
I'm going to peel them down.
Right.
I mean, and from a context perspective, let's think about the evil privatization in a couple of ways. There's clearly the asset leases, long-term asset leases, like the parking meter deal. I mean, the mayor's been very clear about the fact that those are have to be something that work for the citizens, right? That they have to be something that actually we benefit from as a city. And so those are one set of issues, right? There's also the fact that the city does deliver a lot of services, setting aside, these kind of asset sales or these asset leases. The city delivers an enormous amount of services through private companies. That as well needs to be good for the residents and for the people that we provide services to, as well as for the taxpayers. And it is the case in many situations that it's more effective to have, say, the community group that is in a particular neighborhood deliver child care services, or to deliver health care services, or domestic violence services, whatever those services might be, right? Because they're connected to the community, they know that community, they've got a long-term relationship there. They can also bring in outside sources of funding that maybe the city can't access. And many of them are very committed to the work they do and provide really good quality service. And the city has always, in many cities historically, have provided a lot of services through third parties, whether they're private companies or whether they're not-for-profits. And that really hasn't changed over the years. The thing that I would say that's been different this year is a real focus on making sure that we're doing that the most effective way possible, and it's not just simply outsourcing for the sake of outsourcing, but we do know that we can't provide the same quality service at the same price, and that if it's the case of a clinic that can make sure that our patients have better health outcomes and they can do it for half the cost, then that's actually better for our patient, right? That's not so much about whether it's better for the city employees or whether it's better for the city management or the city bureaucracy. That's directly about the patient, and that decision needs to be made. And those two things need to be balanced, right? With respect to the infrastructure trust, this is a completely different concept that really isn't related to the idea of the asset reserves or to the idea of how we provide the services. This is purely about financing and how you finance them. You're right, we can in a lot of cases go to the bond markets. We have just done that for this year to provide money to fix bridges and streets and water pipes and all the other kinds of things we do. There are, however, some financing structures out there that other municipalities have used and other places have used that we haven't taken advantage of. So the real, clear example is this idea of an ESCO, an energy services company, where a company that specializes in energy efficiency comes in. They replace your lights, they replace your HVAC system, they replace your windows, they do all this work for you. They get it taken care of. They've got the expertise in energy efficiency and what it takes to make a building function better and to save energy. And then you pay them back with your savings, right? And so the infrastructure trust is looking at structures like that.
I'm afraid we're down to our last minute, but if the savings don't materialize, then who loses?
Well, the savings have to materialize, and typically with an ESCO structure, you have a guarantee of those savings. And so that's got to be one of the things that goes into the deal, and that's going to be really critical to setting it up properly to make sure that we know those savings are real and that we have a guarantee of those savings.
Okay. I'm just so nervous about the fact that there are so many things I wanted to talk to you about, and we're just kind of like doing this kind of real, we're just like,
right.
just jumping around. And unfortunately, I'm getting the signal. We got to wrap it up. So in the middle of a thought, I'm sorry to say. Alex, thank you so much for being on the show today. I really appreciate it. I know you're one of the busiest people in Chicago, and I appreciate you being here.
You're welcome. Anytime. It's my pleasure.
All right. Okay. Maybe we'll have you back again sometime, although you're getting into the busy cycle now, I know. So
yeah, we
won't be able to see you. But thank you very much, Alex Holt. She's Budget Director for the City of Chicago, and you have been watching Chicago Newsroom. It's a community service of CAN TV. Of course, you can find us here all the time, but you can also watch us anytime you want to watch it. That little address right down there. Just check that out, and you can watch the show anytime you'd like. And you can check us out on iTunes. You can listen to us as an audio podcast, and you can come back next week and we'll have something completely different, and we'll hope you'll be watching us then. I'm Ken Davis. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week on Chicago Newsroom.